I'm going to talk about a paper called Multilingual BERT Has an Accent about evaluating English influences on fluency in multilingual models. I'm Isabel, and this is we're co-authored with Kezia Lopez and with Dan Jurafsky. So, to start off, talking about multilingual models, and even multilingual BERT, which is the one that we look at, which is by no means state of the art, because we have impressive cross-lingual results, right? So, and there's many ways that these have been shown, and very often evaluation is of the form, that we have a model and we have a multilingual task. These are like often translated, though, they are like great evaluation tools. And then we get some kind of coarse-grained metric, right? So some metric like accuracy or even like perplexity in a slightly more fine-grained way. But this paper, we look at fluency evaluation. So instead of looking at performance in something like NLI, we want to look at how fluent the model sounds in non-English languages and kind of measure the effect of English syntactic structure on these code-trained languages, and if the multilingual training has kind of influenced this. And the main idea of this paper is that we focus on constructions that are in free variations. So we pick a construction in a language which has two forms, one which is parallel to English and one which is not. For example, in Spanish, we look at pronoun drops. This is, whether you explicitly say the pronoun as it's necessary to do basically in English, or whether you drop it, and readers, not readers, speakers, for like various reasons, whether they be discourse or mood or whatever, for formality, pick between these two, and that constitutes kind of like a fluent speaker. And in Greek, we look at another effect. We look at subject-verb orders. So this is whether the subject comes before the verb or whether as it does in English, or whether it comes after the verb. For reasons maybe of focusing the verb, you can move it further up. And again, speakers choose between these two, and free variation according to many factors that constitute kind of a fluent Greek speaker. And the question we want to ask, is, does multilingual BERT prefer the parallel English-like construction to a monolingual model? And so the method that we show in this paper is getting an approximation for this probability of preferring parallel. And to do this, we want to gather data. So gather 4 data sets, two for each language, where we take the universal dependencies corpus for that language and pick out sentences that exhibit the one construction, for example, having a pronoun, so a realized pronoun, or the other construction, pro-drop. And you might ask, why aren't we just like making these sentences? Why don't we just like take a sentence with a pronoun and just take it out? And since we're kind of looking for these like fine-grained fluency effects, it's important that we don't construct the data and make kind of like non-fluent data for evaluation. So we wanted to have every sentence we wanted every sentence that we use to be fluent. And so our process then, right, is have our 2 models. We have our 2 data sets per language, and we pass them through the models, and we get these 2 probabilities. I'll talk about exactly how we get them in a bit. And we can compute a ratio for both models, right? So like a parallel to different ratio for the 2 models, and then we want to compare these. So the question now is the last question of, to make our method clear, is how do we approximate the probability of one of the construction? This is not an easy question to answer for, like, especially for a masked language model, but even for a left-to-right language model. And what we do here, which has some grounding in psycholinguistics, literature like studies and reading time, often do this, is that we pick one word in each construction, which we hope to say maybe represents it, and we or at least is an approximation. This is all going to be an approximation, and we just take the logic of that verb, that word. And so in Spanish, we pick the verb of the So whether there is a pronoun or not, we pick the main verb, and then in Greek we pick the first word that appears of either the subject or the verb. We do this because it's like more contextualized, like the rest of the sentence with the previous sentence, and it would make maybe more sense in another regressive setting, which we didn't which we didn't get to for this paper. Anyhow, our results are that in both of these cases, if we compare on the y-axis, this ratio of the probability of the parallel construction, the probability of the different, there is a small effect size, but a significant difference in both of the models that we test, showing that there is this kind of like English bias in multilingual BERT. Away from the kind of what we take to be the ground truth, which may or may not be an accurate assumption, but what we take to be a more fluid monolingual model. And so just to conclude about fluency evaluation as a whole and this paper, the effect that we show here probably won't influence downstream non-generation performance very much. So this is not saying that like the way that these encoder models are used is really influenced by this. And on the other hand, there's so many things that we're not looking at there, right? Like we focus on this kind of like easy to quantify structural effects, but like the thing which makes a sentence something which a native speaker would say rather than something which sounds correct, but it's not maybe something a native speaker would say, they include lexical choice, grammatical choice, discourse. And there's also this like entanglement between fluency and things like domain variation, which like influence, which like, could be the influence of the data. These models, is like being able to vary registers and intertwined with fluency, or like a different effect. And things like translation needs, which is a problem, especially for Wikipedia data. And then for future work, I think it's very important that we would focus on using evaluations that don't, on finding evaluations that don't use a monolingual model, so that we can apply these kinds of tests to actually low resource languages, not just lower resource than English, right? Like Greek, which is the official language of the European country, right? It's not low resource. But we still want to, so how can we not use a monolingual model, but still have a method like this one, which preserves stimuli and naturalness, right? So we don't want to be constructing stimuli if we're trying to test for fluency, and where we can have a control on these natural stimuli to compare against, but where that control is not a monolingual model. So hopefully this is all interesting stuff to think about, and thank you very much for listening.